Good morning, teachers and classmates. And today's presentation, I will be talking about language teaching and assessment as part of the language testing subject. My name is Daisy Arellana Cárdenas, and let's start with an overview of this presentation. First, I'll start talking about language teaching. I'll move on then to assessment. And finally, I'll discuss and highlight some of the similarities and differences between these two processes. Let's begin then with the first one, which is language teaching. As teachers, we know that this is what we do inside a classroom, right? We teach. But in order to teach, we need different activities. We need something that's going to help our students to move from the place that they are to the place where we want them to be. And those things are tasks, activities. And it's important to understand that in our practice, in our teaching, we need those tasks to make students use the target language. The main goal of language teaching is language acquisition and also the ability improvement. The fact that our students are going to be able to listen, write, read, and also speak in the target language is probably the main goal of all of these activities, all of these tasks that we use when we are teaching. Really important also to highlight point number 3, language teaching is an ongoing process. During an entire school year, we are tailoring and we keep repeating, we keep using language tasks for different purposes. And it's really important to understand that it's something that we keep doing, we keep repeating. It's not something that has a final destination that once we finish or we achieve one thing, then it's over. No, it just keeps going, it continues, and it's completely tailored and adapted to what students are needing and how students are responding to our teaching. And number 4 says that social emotional development. And I decided to include this one because when we are teaching, it's true that our main goal is language acquisition, right? It's getting students to improve their skills, to be fluent in a language. But as teachers, we know that activities, when they are well designed, they have a wider range. They have just a much deeper connection with students. And when tasks and activities are made correctly, they can have a deeper impact in students, a social emotional development kind of impact. They develop cultural awareness, empathy, and some other values that are also really important for their lives. It's true that they are not necessarily connected to the academic part of it, but they're life skills and they still contribute to that main goal that I was mentioning before, which was acquisition and also ability improvement. Now, it's also important to analyze and to ask ourselves as teachers, why do I teach? What's my purpose with teaching? I stand there in front of my students. I am teaching. Why am I doing this? And not in a kind of like philosophical way, but more in a practice, insight kind of question, right? And the first answer that came to my mind and after reading the textbook was we teach because we have an academic goal. We have a set of skills that we want our students to achieve. And we have a plan for it because we're not improvising. We have a syllabus, we have a lesson plan, we have unit plans, we have so many tools to get our students from where they are to where they want to be, to where we want them to be. So the first one that I have mentioned here, of course, is that academic goal, that place where we want to take them, that knowledge that we want them to have. The second one for me, completely important, not just for our context, for our national context, but I think very international, very worldwide, is standards. The schools right now function with standards. Universities work with standards. And it's really important to keep this in mind when we are teaching because we want our students to succeed, but not only to our own terms, but also according to international terms. We want them to be accepted into universities. We want them to just go to all of those places where they want to go. So schools and national standards are very important because of that, and one of the reasons why we teach. The third one is personal development. Of course, when our students have a sense of belonging, when they feel accepted, when they are comfortable and engaged within a classroom, uh, they get a sense of personal development. They feel like they belong, that they are doing well. And that's also one of the reasons why I teach, because I want my students to feel comfortable and confident with what they are doing. And that confidence is going to pay off later when they continue to take risks and continue to just try new things in life. And the fourth reason that I have included here is because it has a cultural impact, learning a different language. And I think our students are very positively um, influenced when they learn a second language. Let's move on then to something that is similar in so many ways and connected to language teaching, which is language assessment. So what is it? What is language assessment? Well, in the same way that language teaching requires tasks for its process, language assessment also requires activities to get to the point where we want to be. So language assessment is a process of collecting data of students' performance and language ability. So what we did in the classroom, what we did with all of those activities that had the main goal of teaching, of moving our students and improving our student skills, we get the information of how well we are doing it by using assessment tasks. So that's why I say it's really connected, because we wouldn't be able to have the information about how our students are doing, how they really are doing, because sometimes as teachers we ask, like, did you understand? And that's the worst possible question that we could be asking. But language assessments task really gives us a clear idea of how and where our students are. That's why it's really important and so connected to language teaching. I have also included here that is the first step of a larger process. Of course, because once you collect all that data, you end up with like a pile of information. And that's when you start analyzing and just making different decisions and moving and editing and just correcting what you were not doing so well, and just you keep improving the things that you were doing well. So it's the first step. It's the first thing we do. We collect all of that data, all of that information through assessment tasks, and then we decide, we start making decisions and tailoring our teaching according to that. And it's also important to highlight that teachers use assessment language tasks to interpret, of course, all the information results, and then, of course, make important decisions inside the classroom that, of course, are going to affect our language teaching. Now, why do we assess? Assessing is probably one of the most important parts within the teaching process. And even though they are different, and even though they have different purposes, you cannot talk about teaching or proper teaching without assessment. So it's a paradox, right? Like, even though they're different, they're still so close together, they cannot be mentioned without having to address the other one. So why do I assess? First, because I want to understand more. I want to see where my students are. I want to see if my students are reacting well. I want to see how my students are feeling. I want to see who they are. The second reason that I have included here is because we have to tailor our teaching. We have to really be responding to those needs and be cutting and putting and gluing things together in order to make up and to do something that fits and that works for students. And the final reason I have included here is because it's also necessary to update resources and practices. Sometimes the only thing that we want is to see if just to see if the material that we are using, if the routines that we are doing are actually working or not. So that could be another reason why we assess. I have included here some similarities and differences, but like I said before, there are more similarities than differences. Probably the main difference between these two different processes is the purpose, okay? The purpose of teaching, of course, is getting students into a point that you wish them to be. So we call that learning, right? To get to this higher position of learning and of knowledge, whilst the purpose of assessment is to collect information, to collect data, to understand more things about our teaching. So that could be the main difference between the purpose, between teaching and assessment, the purpose. And also the kinds of decisions that we make, right? Like usually the type of decisions that we make while we're teaching come up in that moment, right? We are being responsive just in that second when we are teaching, but the decisions that we make after the assessment are much more planned and much more meticulous because they need to be like that. And because we have all of that, like pile of information that we could be using for make smarter decisions. But when we are teaching, it's just like we are reacting to what's going on in that moment. So I have included those two differences, and similarities I have more. Probably the most obvious one is that they both take place in classroom settings. They are both, like I said, ongoing processes in the same way that assessment is the first step. Teaching is, again, a whole entire process in which you have to go back, analyze, and so. The third one that I have included is that they should be student-centered, both of them, teaching and also assessment. They should be focused on students, on what students need and what students want and what students really are going to be like and are going to need in the future. And the fourth one, probably the most important, is that they both require activities, they both require tasks for them to function. Assessment needs something, needs an instruction and activity in the same way as language teaching. You cannot have language teaching without students producing and making different things. These are my references for the presentation, and thank you so much for your attention. And I'll be happy to receive any feedback from this.